Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. In a brand new interview with Jonathan Swan from Axios, the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell actually provided us with a glimpse into his way of thinking and the fact that he is most likely going to support former President Donald Trump, even though there's no love lost between them for the 2024 presidential elections. Welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. Here's the news. Jonathan Swan actually asked Mitch McConnell, recent polls show your approval rating is in the 30s among Republicans. Why do they hate you? Mitch McConnell said, my job is not to run up political popularity. Nationally, the two constituents that matter to me are the people at home and the people in the Senate. Let's roll the tape and watch this fascinating exchange with the Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell. Let's watch.
You're the most powerful elected Republican in Washington, D.C., and despite all the BS I hear around, there's no obvious challenger to your leadership. People like to gin it up, but there isn't. And yet recent polls show your approval rating is in the 30s among Republicans, not Democrats, Republicans. Why do they hate you?
Look, there are two constituents that are important to doing this job. The people of Kentucky, who've sent me here 7 times, and the Republican members of the Senate, who've elected me 8 times without opposition. I'm proud of that. My job is not to run up political popularity nationally. I'm not running for anything nationally. And when you are running one of the parties, you end up making people irritated. 100% of the opposition doesn't like you. And you have to make decisions between factions at various times, and frequently you don't have that greatest support internally. So, as I said, the two constituents that matter to me are the people at home and the people in the Senate.
But do you have a theory about, because it sounds like part of your theory is it's the cost of leadership. Being in leadership is not a popularity contest, and you take decisions that can, be compromises. It's an ugly business sometimes. But it doesn't make sense to me because I was looking at Schumer and Pelosi's polling among Democrats, and they're extremely popular. Pelosi was 67%, Schumer was 57%, you're 36% among Republicans. Do you have a theory as to why that is?
Yeah, just the price of leadership.
But they're the leaders of their party.
Well, if I had a theory about it, I wasn't going to sit here and discuss it with you, Jonathan.
Okay.
In another segment, Jonathan Swan asks Mitch McConnell where he draws his moral red lines. Check out this fascinating response from Mitch McConnell as to where he draws his own moral red lines. Because I can tell you this, there's only one thing that Mitch McConnell cares about, and that is making sure that Republicans retain control of the United States Senate. However that may be, he is a very, very experienced and a very skilled operator who's been in the Senate for decades, and he doesn't care if you don't like him, if I don't like him. He knows what he wants, and I believe his moral red lines are rather flexible. Let's roll the tape and see what Mitch McConnell said to Jonathan Swan about his moral red lines. Let's watch.
I didn't realize I was known for playing a ruthless. I thought my wife thinks I'm a really nice guy. My kids like me. I got a lot of friends.
That's 4 so far, okay.
I'm shocked to hear such a comment.
I watched your speech last year in February on the Senate floor after the second impeachment vote on Donald Trump. And it was an extraordinary speech. You spoke very powerfully against the most powerful figure in your party, the president. And you said Donald Trump's actions preceding the January 6th insurrection were a, quote, disgraceful dereliction of duty, and that he was practically and morally responsible, your words, for provoking the events of that day. How do you go from saying that to 2 weeks later saying you'd absolutely support Donald Trump if he's the Republican nominee in 2024?
Well, as the Republican leader of the Senate, it should not be a front page headline that I will support the Republican nominee for president.
After you've said that about him, I think it's astonishing.
I think I have an obligation to support the nominee of my party. And
is there anything they could do?
I will. That will mean that whoever the nominee is has gone out and earned the nomination.
Okay, but Donald Trump earned it last time, and I'm just trying to understand, what you say matters. You're a very important voice in this country. You're the leader of your party, and you seem to hold two concurrent, conflicted positions, which is
not at all
If I just
inconsistent.
finish.
Not at all inconsistent. I stand by everything I said on
I understand, but
January 6th and everything I said on February the 13th.
I understand that, but what I want to understand, which I haven't heard you address, is
Because I don't get to pick the Republican nominee for president. They're elected by the Republican voters all over the country.
I fully understand that, but take Liz Cheney, for example.
You want to spend some more time on this as well?
I actually do, because I actually, no, I genuinely want to understand this. I really want to understand how you think about this, because Liz Cheney, who has the same view of you of January 6th, she said she doesn't want Donald Trump anywhere near the White House, and she's going to work to not make that happen, because she thinks that there are some things more important than party loyalty.
Well, maybe you ought to be talking to Liz Cheney.
No, but I'm not trying to... I really, it's not a gotcha. I'm just actually trying to understand, like, is there any threshold for you of what someone can do on a moral level?
I say many things I'm sure people don't understand.
And folks, in what is potentially the most explosive part of this exchange, it's very clear that Mitch McConnell will back former President Trump if he's the 2024 nominee. And it's very clear that the power of former President Trump is so significant that Mitch McConnell's power is actually nothing. It actually pales in comparison. You already knew this, but I want you to know that way before former President Trump came along, Mitch McConnell was considered a wizard in the Senate. He now recognizes the fact that if former President Trump wants to run again, whether Mitch McConnell likes it or not, he's going to have to support him. Let's take a look at this fascinating exchange between Casey Hunt, who's the anchor of The Source with Casey Hunt at CNN Plus, and Jonathan Swan from Axios. And Jonathan is sharing his insight after his interview with the Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell. Let's roll the tape and watch.
The Republican National Committee is paying Donald Trump's personal legal bills for his business troubles in New York. So if McConnell's doing things to stop him being the nominee in 24, I can't see them. I know he would love for him not to be the nominee, but like hope is not a strategy. And I'm sure he talks to donors and things like that, but I don't see any real organized effort to stop that from happening. I think your first point is definitely happening. You know, that there's been an under the radar to some extent clash as in terms of candidates in some of these primaries, but even I think that can be overstated. Usually people bring up examples of like McConnell tried to recruit Doug Ducey and Larry Hogan or whatever, and they're both people that Trump despises, and those recruitments didn't work out and whatever. But actually, I'm not seeing a huge amount of fighting there either. And a great example is Donald Trump endorsed Herschel Walker, in Georgia, who's got a terribly troubling track record of allegations of domestic violence. McConnell, I know his team was concerned about Herschel Walker, but ultimately McConnell ended up endorsing Herschel Walker. And that seems to me that he sort of read the tea leaves and said, you know, that this one's not worth fighting.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think is particularly interesting or that stands out is that McConnell's power, I think, in the age of Trump is actually waning, and acknowledging that in any way in public really completely explodes the brand that his team has spent years and years carefully cultivating, this idea that he is a wizard master behind the scenes who is really controlling everything. And I think you've just laid out some pretty strong examples of how that's no longer the case.
So that is it, folks. The new political reality, the new red line from Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and his new support for former President Trump, regardless of what he wants, because he understands political realities and he has his own moral red lines that are flexible, shall we say. Let me know what you think. Please click like, please click subscribe, please enable notifications. Thank you so much for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Take care. Bye.